Hey everyone, you're watching Conversations in Pop Culture, and I am your host, Andrew Davis. And before I introduce my guest, I'd like to remind everyone you need to support and financially support what you love, whether it is this show, my guest's comic, corporate media. I personally do not care, but these projects do not get made without financial support. And if you don't financially support it and it disappears, don't come crying to me. But enough about that, because I don't want to make this a pity party, as I have with me comic creator Chris Michaels. So welcome back to the show, or welcome to the show, because this is our first time meeting.
Yeah, it's my first time on here.
Yeah, so I'm actually very excited to have you on because your book is interesting. It's an interesting take on superheroes. It is Crit. I think it is issue 6, if I'm not
Yep,
sort of.
it's the 7th issue. I have an issue 0, so it kind of throws everything off. But yeah, it's number 6, issue 7. So this is our 5th crowdfunding adventure. So um, you know, it's been quite a ride. We funded in like 15 minutes, which was awesome, and a lot of repeat backers, some new faces. Always love seeing the brand grow. We did $1,500 in about 16 minutes, and then right around $2,000 the first night. Last night we just broke our first stretch goal of $3,000, closing in on the next one. So within a week
Yeah,
we're
we're going to
doing
get
real
into
well.
all of this because it is interesting. But obviously, for those who are hearing about it, because there's people who know Crit and there are people who don't know Crit. And so, what is the basic premise for somebody who is hearing about this for the first time, has no idea what your book is? What's Crit? Is it a creature? Is it an insect? Obviously, it's neither one of those things. But what is the basic premise for those who are hearing about it for the first time?
So Crit is a book about a group of superpowered adventurers that it's based off of Dungeons and Dragons. So the whole story is literally our Dungeons and Dragons game brought to life. It's a superhero version of D&D that we made, and it was just a lot of fun. So I turned it into a comic book, and here we are. 2 years in, 7 issues. We're not going to stop anytime soon. We got about 42 books planned, but the whole premise is these guys go to work, they get superpowers, and what do? Well, they were at work, so their powers technically belong to their employer. So they are now employed as superheroes, and that's their job. And we follow them through this adventure, learning how to deal with powers, facing different challenges. And just like with any adventuring group, you've got, your good guys, you've got your guys that have a weird moral compass. But if I were to describe it, I always tell people it's like taking an episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, mixing with Ninja Turtles and Police Academy. And you pretty much have my book.
Yeah, let's even talk about this a little bit further because one of the things is that obviously they have powers and they didn't ask for these powers.
Right.
And now they have these powers, and then they say, look, let's try to be superheroes, but let's also not be vigilantes, is the
Right.
question. And then they have a whole learning curve, and then it's also dealing with their employer, and then their employer also might have its own objective with them. And so now they're really figuring out this entire new landscape because when you add the element of their employer owns their powers, that becomes tricky. And then what happens when it's 9 o'clock at night? Does that mean that, they don't have to go out and save the world at 9 o'clock? And it's all these questions. And then they're dealing with another enemy that's also doing human experimentation and the Masters of Mayhem and Alchem X. I like doing an X like that. And so, and I'm throwing a lot of darts at the board here for a reason because there is, 6 issues that precede this issue. But clearly there's a lot of stuff going on. And so what is that like? Because you really set up a very interesting premise.
Just like with any D&D group, I might tell them they need to do something, but they don't always do it. They really do tell the story. I set the stage as a dungeon master. They tell the entire story. I'm just there to kind of guide them along. Early on in the storytelling aspect and playing the game, I realized that I wasn't going to tell the story I wanted to tell. I was going to react to the story that they wanted to tell. And I kind of took a step back as a storyteller and let them just play in the sandbox that I created. and I would come to the table and say, this is the situation that you're facing. These are the things going on. What do you do? Let them run with it. And I would just have this bucket of things that I would throw at them, or situations that I wanted to have occur, but I let them occur according to what they did. So that way they had fun. I still accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. And we have this unique organic story that isn't written and forced. It is all natural. Everything happens with the roll of the die. It's all by chance. So it's really unique. And those things that you're talking about, like, what do they do if it's 9 o'clock at night and their boss calls? Well, they might not pick up the phone, and then I would have to, have repercussions for them on my side. Maybe they take a dock and pay, or those things. But, in the last issue, we show that they get really tired of working for this group. So in D&D terms, they negotiated with me, and they rolled really good conversation checks to get their way. They bluff and deception and things to try and get out of these agreements they had, and they made new agreements. So in the book that we have now, it's called Caffeinated Chaos, because when they left their employer, I'm like, well, you guys left, that's cool, but what do you do now for bullets? Like, how do you pay for your guns? How do you pay for your suits? How do you pay for all this stuff? You had the equivalent of Apple funding everything you wanted, and now you have nothing. And they're like, oh, we're going to open up a coffee shop. And so,
yeah, let's get into this too, because we're going to talk about the actual story and the D&D components. That's also fascinating in its own right. But even this new issue is that they've become small business owners, and they want to fund their superhero or vigilantism, for lack of a better word. And they're learning how to manage a small business, how to leverage their brand, and then also what can you do now that you're in your small business, and every, cup of coffee you sell, if you only sell 10 cups of coffee, you might only be able to have 100 bullets in your gun the following day. And so now you have a real complicated issue. See, this gets fun, right? Because now you financialized superheroism, for lack of a better word, is what this issue is dealing with. And so what is that like? Because I haven't seen that yet necessarily, because we don't see that in DC. We don't see that in Marvel. But you're sort of tackling that a little bit.
They handle a budget. When they left, they did create contracts with them to be able to handle situations for them and still have money coming in from their previous employer, but more as contractors instead of employees. That way they had more freedom to do what they wanted. And the coffee shop is extra money in pocket. That was used to fund some things that happened later. That's also just a pet project of one of the characters really wanted a coffee shop, because in the game, one of his powers is to be able to infuse drinks. So his drinks are just that good now that they're the best coffee shop in town. No matter how bad their customer service is, people still come back. So, now they're putting Starbucks out of business and all these places, and they're doing it because the character has the ability to make his drinks the best drinks. It's unique. I never planned any of this stuff when they started throwing things at me. It was just fun. I thought it was fun. We had like a blast playing. There's lots of inside jokes about this stuff now, and the cool part is they also created energy drinks. So this was like the kid's plan from day one, was to have coffee and energy drinks, because he's a caffeine addict like myself. And so in this book, on the Kickstarter, we do have our own energy drink that I've created. It's available on the Kickstarter, and that was one of the flavors that we did. It's called Spectre's After Death. It's like a tangy lime Red Bull kind of flavor. It's sugar-free. And in the game, that flavor is the one that will revitalize you if you've been down. So it'll stabilize someone, except Caliber, because he's immune to all magic. So
let's even talk about that too, in the creation of the energy drink. Obviously, there's a lot of D&D stuff in here. But what is this like? Because now when you go out and create something that's in a comic, and then you bring it into I guess, and this is going to sound messed up the way I'm going to say it, but you bring it into the real world and you bring an energy drink that is technically fictional, and then
Mhm.
you bring it out into a non-fictional setting. What is that like? Because it does make the comic more real, I feel. It also breaks, I guess, the fourth wall to some degree, where you created a product out of nothing, essentially. Where that
I mean, it's cool.
didn't exist before. I mean, like, I don't know how to say this any other way. Like, that's why
Yeah.
this is a problem for me to even ask the question, because it's a weird concept what I'm describing, but it's also very cool because now somebody's reading it in a comic, and then it's like, oh, you can pick it up and you can pick up a 12 pack of this.
Mhm.
And you're not looking to take on Monster Energy, but if you're a fan of the comic and you love this book, how cool is it for you as a fan to be like, cool, I'm reading this book and then I'm bringing the same thing to my job, or I'm drinking it while I'm reading it. You know
Mhm.
what I mean?
Well, it's like, having your superhero cups. It's all, um, I mean, it's marketing at its best. But the cool part to us is I was able to give one of my players something that they created in game, something tangible in real life. And this comic is like our comic in tangible form for them. Um, I've never really come across anybody else that does this, that plays D&D and then figures out a way to organize it into an actual comic book, without physically writing what's going on. Um, it, they they give me a lot of great content, and so in return, I'm just glad that I can give them this book. And we've done quite a bit, actually. So one of the Kickstarters we did, a statue of Caliber. We've done a statue of Boulder, and then we've got this. This is our stuffed Samedi doll. This one, that's everyone's favorite right there, because he's a stuffed talking cat that has an alcohol problem and he smokes cigars. So everybody loves him, because who wouldn't want a cat that smokes cigars and drinks
So
alcohol out of
to
people?
even go into the D&D side, because it's a unique writing process in a lot of ways, where you are playing a D&D game, you're
Mhm.
the dungeon master. And look, I'm not as familiar with D&D as other tabletop games, but I have friends who do it and they do it well. And I can't say their names because their names are right now a dirty word. And if you know anything about D&D, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Um, it's pretty evident who I'm speaking about right
Mhm.
now. It's not that hard to figure out. But what is this like? Because you get a lot of content from this game. A lot of the game sort of writes itself. These characters have developed themselves, and obviously these games have been playing not for an hour, but for months, if not years.
Mhm.
And so, what is that like? Because I think it's a real advantage to actually have this interaction. Because unfortunately, and again, I haven't written a comic book yet, but from my understanding, it is a very solo, alone process where most comic writers work alone. They
Mhm.
then send to their artist. Maybe they have an hour conversation with their artist, or they're communicating through email, and very few people have collaborators. And it seems that if you're playing this game, all of you are interacting with each other over hours, if not weeks, if not months, if not years. And then you've now taken that and you have these characters are well defined. And also you get that dialogue because the situation pops up, 6 months into the game. And now you know how to write a character's dialogue because you've seen how they've interacted. So, what is that like? Because it does create a more natural feel. And obviously, you sent me a bunch of stuff and I've read only half of what you sent me, but you can tell that it feels genuine and it doesn't
Mhm.
feel like this wouldn't happen.
Yeah. So everything you read comes out of their mouths. The process begins at the table. So I'll record the session, and then for about a week prior to me drawing the book, I'll start listening to it and I'll storyboard it. So I'll make notes on my phone, on a tablet, whatever I have in front of me. I'll be making notes and remembering pieces that have happened, so I can take that dialogue and take that action scene and go, okay, this is how this unfolded. This is where we're at here. And then when I'm done with the overall art, I bring it to them, page by page, usually 2 to 3 pages at a time. I send to them and say, hey, anything you want to change. Maybe they want to change positioning of a character, or I've had so many small things that get changed in the course of the art. But then after the art is completely finished and we've done that piece, we go back in and we start lettering. And what I'll do is I'll have placeholder dialogue from the game in each, in the script. So I'll go ahead and I'll script it, and we do a writing night where we get on Discord for a couple hours and we go page by page, frame by frame, and we read it out. Okay, maybe we can change this piece of dialogue, or we've already repeated this, let's adjust that. But those people are there, so if we have to adjust their dialogue, what would you say here? And then they can give what they would say, and we might make it a little bit more witty, or tone down the wittiness because this entire page is nothing but sarcasm. Let's change the tone for this. And we use, like, that person is able to modify their own dialogue. So it's not me, it's not somebody else, it's coming out of their mouth. If I have to make any changes, I know them well enough. I've known them for 15 years. And they've been some of my best friends. So it's not hard for me to say, hey, you'd probably say this right here. And then I'll screenshot it and say, how's this? And they'll give me some feedback, or usually I get like, yeah, that's good.
Because this is a very different writing process, where this is almost like a TV room, I feel, and writing for television versus writing comic books. So this is not how it's normally done, from my understanding.
Not at all.
And so that's what makes this very different, I feel, is this is a very collaborative book. That's not an anthology, if that makes any sense. And again, I might be speaking completely out of my ass when I'm speaking, because I am probably technically not qualified to be even going down this route or even assuming anything. But from what I know, it's very much like a television room.
Yeah, it is collaborative storytelling, similar to what you see in a lot of television, because in television, especially like if you take a sitcom, right? You have people that write specific characters for the sitcom all the time. They know that character, they write that character. You might have a team that works on 2 or 3, but they're always writing the same characters. And same with our game. Our players are writing their characters over and over and over again. And I'm just putting together the action, and I'm drawing it. They're telling me what happens, I'm making it come to life. So it's very unique. I didn't really realize how unique this was until probably the last few months when we had launched book 5. We went to Kickstarter in, I think, March of this year. And, after 5 or 6 books, people start to really pay attention to you. Like, oh, I guess you're not going away. I might as well look at you. And the questions started coming up, like similar to this. And I didn't realize until then that this was something so unique. To me, this is easy. This is normal. This is all we've ever done. So I don't know any other way. Prior to this, I have no comic book experience. I love comic books. I collect them. You can see my shelves back there. I've been a comic book collector since I was a kid. But writing never, like the idea of drawing never even entered my mind. I taught myself how to draw so I could do book 1. I really didn't have a background. So when I especially talking to people in the industry and professionals that give me this wide-eyed glaze, like, how do you do that? How did you convince your friends to write a story? I'm like, I guess I'm just a really good bard, and I have those abilities to convince them to do stupid stuff so I can make it happen on page.
Because it's just so interesting to me. And obviously, I mean, as a podcaster, podcasting collectively is collaborative, because especially if you're interviewing, it is a team effort between me and my guest. And if my guest is having a bad day, it could take a lot of effort from me to get them out of their bad day and get them, right where I need to be. And then also sometimes you just click with somebody, and, that's one of the things that it just connects. And it's very collaborative. And so, but I know for a fact that comic book writing is not always that way. And so I just think it's interesting in that front, and even just figuring out how to do it. And then also really you just sort of laying down, I feel like, a setting and just an entry point as well is really where, that goes, because D&D stories, you can't just throw me as a reader into the middle of a D&D story that's been going on for 6 years. I'm going to be a little confused. Just a little bit.
Yep. I do try to make every book accessible. There's always a preface in the beginning that says that, I'm a big X-Men 90s fan. So like previously on, so at least you have an idea. Early on, I had sent my book to a few friends, and one of them was like, "Hey, you need to let me know who's in the book on the first page. So as a new person, I know who Boulder is, like I know who these people are." And I went back and I said, "Yeah, that's right." So I added a page that detailed who these characters were and said, this is Boulder, this is Caliber. So that way, when you're reading the book and you see their names, you're like, oh, that's what that character does. He shoots things, or he punches things, or he lights things on fire,
I mean, the way I've read the first three, and so I feel that if you read book 1 and 2 and 3, I don't feel like I could jump in at book 3, and I don't think I can jump in at book 4, but I feel like I could jump in at book 6 right now,
Yeah.
or the 7th issue, book 6, or issue 6, where I feel like that's a jumping on point, where I feel like their quest has ended. If this was a D&D story, they were on like a long, trekking quest for the last, 5 issues. And now they're starting a new quest, but it's the same characters. And
Yep.
obviously they have scars and issues from the first quest, but I don't need to know it. It's kind of like, you're going on a new adventure in a lot of
And
ways.
that's exactly it. Chapter 2 kicks off with this issue, and it's a continuation of their story, but it's just like if you're watching TV, season 1 ends, season 2 starts. No matter what you get in.
I got the perfect show that's going to explain all of this. This is like Ash Ketchum going from Kanto to Johto. This is exactly like that because it's a brand new start. But if you've been with Ash going through the Orange Islands and all of Kanto, you know who Ash is. But guess what? He's starting brand new from scratch, minus a little bit more wisdom.
Yeah, and they jumping in, especially with book 7, you can get in the Kickstarter. I have all the books available, and even on my website, I give away issue 0 for free. So you can just go to homebrewedcomics.com, download the issue 0, check it out, see if you like it, and go from there. But if you just picked up book 7, or book 6, you wouldn't feel jarred, you wouldn't feel confused, because it opens with a bunch of world building anyway. I do like to world build, especially at the beginning of a chapter, just to say, this is where we're at, this is what's going on, and build that environment for the reader. And then once you have that feel of, okay, so this is what's going on, now we can focus on the characters and what they're doing and where they're going. And then boom, giant robots. Okay, like, it's a D&D campaign. We're gonna have we're just gonna have fun. And I've been saying it since the first time I ever talked about my book. Somebody asked me, well, what's your book like? And I said, it's just fun. At the end of the day, this is a bunch of 30, 40-year-old men having fun being superheroes. And it shows.
So let's even talk about that too, because this is one of the things with comics that just drives me crazy. And comics have always been political, and not to get too controversial, but it's the idea that I think a lot of people in comics are trying to prove a point. Whatever that point is, I don't really care. But guess what? I want a good X-Men story, or I want a good Green Lantern story. I don't want, the politics could be put in there. There could be an environmental point. There could be a social point. Obviously Civil War, X-Men was about civil rights. And the fact that they created their own island because they didn't want to be persecuted, and they created Mutant Island. Brilliant concept. And if you don't know what that's about, I mean, it's pretty obvious. But again, I didn't feel, though, that it was a bad story. I felt like the story came first. And I felt the story was, I wouldn't call it fun, but it was entertaining. But I think this is one of the things that people are forgetting in comics, is that life is hard, everybody. And in case anybody hasn't realized it, I don't have an easy life. And when I want to read a bunch of comics or watch television, I want to forget about my problems for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and I want to escape. And I think that's something that you're trying to do in your book, is to have a good time and sort of be an escapism. Because let's face it, life is hard. And no matter who you are, it's hard.
And that's really why we got together and played D&D, was we were all at different points in our life. Some of us have gone through some pretty tough times in the past few years. And D&D is supposed to be that escape, that fun, right? And I've had people ask me, why don't you have characters like this in there or this in there? It's based off my friends. If they don't fit the category, in real life, it's not going to be in the book. I might have characters that show up that, are in different categories or whatever. It's New Orleans, so it's a very diverse crowd. I'm sure we're going to run into tons of different people, but my main cast is my friends, and this is just supposed to be fun. There's no message. There's a story, and if that story connects with you on a certain way, then awesome. If you just have fun reading it, awesome. Um, I believe that fiction, as it is, should always be enjoyed individually. I shouldn't tell you what you're supposed to get out of this story. You should just get whatever it is. And I've had people tell me, like they've read one of the books or a few of the stories and be like, "Oh, I really connect with this character. Like this is how he makes me feel," and that's awesome. I really like that because that's based off a real person. So that real person just made you feel this way. There was no on my end and our end in general. We keep all of those things out of the book, like politics and all that stuff, because we all have different backgrounds. We all have different histories. We all have even different beliefs and different, ideals. But we're all friends. And I'm an '80s kid. We didn't talk about politics and religion at my table, right? Like we just didn't. I didn't grow up with this environment we're in now, and that's where we want to be. It doesn't mean that we don't have ideals and morals and these different things that maybe we align with people, but that's not what our book's about. And I really don't want people to read our book and feel any which way other than this is fun. So
Yeah, or they're dealing with some serious superhero stuff here where look, they just became heroes, and how do you become a superhero? That's a real message right there where you just got a lot of responsibility, because that's what I got out of the book, is that these people just got a lot of responsibility and they want to have more freedom with their responsibility because they think they could do better with, having, less control over their life and their employers. And that's what I got out of the book in a lot of ways as a broad message. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, I don't think, though, that what these characters are dealing with on an individual basis and how certain characters made me feel, that might be more of how I'm reading it. But that's how I view the book, is that we got a cool concept here where these people got powers and then they want to start their own business, or they want to be contractors versus employees. And it's they want more freedom because they want to be more superhero-esque, and they want to be those heroes and kind of call their own shots a little bit.
The premise was, when we first started, I said, you're you wake up today and you have superpowers. What do you do? And no matter who you are, if you woke up with abilities that nobody else had the next day, you're not going to be a superhero. You don't even know who you are with these yet. You don't know how you identify with your abilities. So it was a growing process. Like they really don't become heroes. They're heroes for hire, or they're just doing these missions for an employer. Doesn't mean they're heroes. Yes, they're saving people, but it's because they're being told to. It takes a little while for them to get into that role of, oh, we are heroes, like we can save people. And they do tackle a lot of like tough things. Like they later on they take out a human trafficking ring. There's these things that they do that, I mean, and they tackle some really serious things, but that's not the forefront of the story. They like, we actually look back and we're like, wow, in some of these areas it gets really dark, but it's a dark setting, but the characters aren't like brooding. You don't feel the darkness as much as, say, you would if it was a Batman story or a Spawn story where everything's dark. This is like, oh wow, that's really crazy and chaotic, and I can't believe this guy he has a whole building of people that he's going to try and transform into beings, like he's tricked them all. And it's like they're doing illegal experimentation on humans, and they take this whole thing out, but they do it in the most hilarious way. Like literally that issue when they take out this human trafficking ring, two of them show up they're in shorts, flip-flops, their masks, and they have Hawaiian t-shirts on because they thought they were going to the pool. And they're like, "Oh, I thought you were taking us to to go to the beach and sunbathe. Why did you tell us that we were going to Florida?" And they were like, "We just said we were going to Florida. We didn't tell you you were going to the beach." And because the way I set the stage, I was like, "Yeah, there's something going on in Florida. You need to go." And they were like, "Okay, cool." We show up in our beach clothes, and I was like, "You're about to jump out of an airplane in your beach clothes." "Yeah, cool. We get to land on the beach in our beach clothes. We'll be ready." And they have no idea what's below them. They show up and they're like, "Oh, maybe I should have been wearing my outfit." And so they're taking out all these, bad guys in flip flops and and like Hawaiian shirts, and they uncover what's going on. And yes, it's terrible and it's dark, but you're looking at dudes that just have like Hawaiian shirts on, and they're like, "Can I have a drink?" Like, just cool. We saved you. All right, cool. We're going to the beach. Like, hope you guys are okay. And that's where that fun aspect comes in. We can tackle these tough things without it leaving a mark, and changing that tone of the story. It's just a backdrop.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and obviously there's a lot of stuff to unpack in this, and there's a lot of stuff, and there's a reason why I'm trying to be as broad as humanly possible, because obviously I don't want to ruin the first 5 issues of what's going on, because they're dealing with a lot of different things. They're obviously going on the road a little bit. They're on missions, and things are going on, and they're engaging in some interesting things, and some of it's funny, some of it's complicated, and as you stated, there's a learning curve, and it's also them growing as people in a lot of ways too, where it's this group of people and these heroes and these friends and these coworkers discovering who they are, and there's a lot of stuff that can happen in this, and there's a lot of evolution, and it can go 20 different ways. Where I
It
mean,
does.
obviously, I have 14 ideas off the top of my head. You could have splintering groups, you could have separate groups, you could have diversions, you could have difference of opinions on how situations should be handled. And I got a feeling there's going to get to a point somewhere in one of your books where somebody or the group makes a bad decision and there's real consequences. And
Yeah.
it's coming. It's coming. It's the idea that, we look at Superman, right? Superman can wipe out all of humanity in seconds if he wanted to, in seconds.
Mhm.
But he doesn't. But there are certain stories that DC has done where Superman has failed. And how do you deal with that? There's Spider-Man stories. Look at Gwen Stacy, right?
Mhm.
The next snap where Peter failed. And that's a pretty intense story. And so, there's just a lot to play with, but I don't want to ruin too much of what's going on. I don't think issue
No, we
6.
can talk. I mean, I'm a firm believer in giving as much information without spoiling it, and I think we can do that. Um, the story itself, it is just a D&D game, and someone who plays D&D is going to go, "Oh, that's a dungeon crawl," right? Because they're in a warehouse and they're taking out bad guys. But they're taking out a bad guy that they don't know what he can do, and it just so happens he absorbs kinetic energy. And the first thing that Caliber does is throw grenades at him. What's gonna happen? He's gonna become the most powerful villain they've ever fought, and he's gonna try and kill them because now he has all this pent up energy that you just fed him, and that's how one of those fights goes. And really, the first chapter was me challenging them with similar, like if you see the villains in the first chapter, the Masters of Mayhem, they're this counteraction to the creation of Crit. It's like, oh, there are superheroes on the scene, we need our own. So there's a company doing this stuff that they shouldn't be. They're making their own villains, and it's not working out. People are going missing, things are getting stolen, and Crit finds these villains, and they're like, well, you're you're kidnapping people, you're doing all this crazy crap, we need to stop you, right? But what the funny thing is, it's similar to like your Batman story, where the villains exist because they're trying to be, they're trying to beat it to market. In Batman, all the villains exist because of Batman. And my ongoing joke was, you have a bunch of big corporations trying to be the next big thing. What's the next big thing? Super beings. And the counteraction to Crit is like these people who don't have moral compass, and they're doing bad things versus Crit's doing good things. And so in this next chapter, we're introducing robots. It's like, well, if these villains didn't work out because they can be corrupted, what's going to happen if we can have robots that can be better than Crit? And we'll see how that goes, because that's a challenge. Crit has, as superheroes and superpowers, they're equipped to fight super villains, because superpowers versus superpowers. What do you do when you're just fighting a big hunk of metal and you're punching it, and it's very durable, or you're trying to cut it with a magic sword that doesn't go through it, or you throw a fireball at it and it's metal, it's just going to get hot, right? Like, you shoot it with a gun, bullets are going to bounce off it. How do you fight this giant 20-foot robot, right? That's where we're at. And those are the challenges that I kept throwing at them. As a dungeon master, the game always comes first, right? The comic is a secondary for us. Because if I put the comic book first, we're now putting the story that we want to tell versus the story that we're going to tell.
That's interesting.
And it loses the organic piece,
Yeah, no, it's interesting, because obviously I think this is one of the biggest problems when we look at board games in general. You look at all these games by all these companies, like, when Avatar: The Last Airbender has a tabletop game, the real question becomes that where does the IP stack? You look at things with video games, you look at a lot of other things. Look at Warner Brothers Discovery and look at Disney. This is a big issue right now, where I hate to pick on She-Hulk because I enjoyed She-Hulk in a lot of ways. I didn't say She-Hulk was the greatest thing ever. I want to clarify that before I get attacked. But the comic She-Hulk and the show on Disney Plus are very different. And where does the comic stack as the original IP versus the show? And this is a real
everything the MCU does, though, is different from the comics. Now, full disclosure, I haven't watched She-Hulk. I haven't watched a lot of the stuff. I work 2 full-time jobs, and I work on my own stuff, right? I have very little time, and most of my time goes into sci-fi.
I was required to watch She-Hulk because everybody was talking about it, and I didn't want to feel left out. But again, I don't have much time either. I had to pick and choose. I gave up like 2 weeks of watching anime to watch She-Hulk. So clearly, I made a great choice. Clearly.
When I look at shows, this was my take on it, right? I didn't really like Ally McBeal. I wasn't a fan of Ally McBeal. And when I saw the premise of She-Hulk, I'm like, it's like Ally McBeal with superheroes. So if I didn't like Ally McBeal, I'm not going to like this. It has nothing to do with the quality of the show or any of the content. It just means that type of show doesn't appeal to me. And it's weird because we're in this unique area with pop culture where if you're a fan of Marvel but you don't like a show, you're either going, like, the people that consistently just try to trash things, I question them, because it's like, if you don't like it, don't watch it. Like all the people that suffered through the Halo show. I watched that. I play a lot of Halo. Not a huge, I didn't read a lot of the books, but I know a lot of the story. And I got into an argument with my friend one day who just consistently watched this show to call me to tell me how bad it was. And I'm like, why do you watch it then? Like, I've watched it. It's really not that great. It's a good background noise. It's not Halo to me, but if you hate it, why do you watch it? He's like, I'm hoping they do something good. I'm like, then wait till it ends and then just read if they did or not. And then he called me. He's like, can you believe it got a second season? I said, yeah, I can, because people like you continually watched it. You guys hated it so much and tuned in every week. So now you gave it a second season. It's your fault, And
it gets tricky when the IP, where it stacks with comics in particular. And even what you were saying, where I think you obviously put the game and the D&D game first, and then the comic is secondary. But clearly the market has changed. in a lot of ways with, things like She-Hulk, because, well, the real money for a lot of these companies and even video game properties is having the Halo TV show. The Halo TV show is just as much of a moneymaker, if not more of a moneymaker than the games, which is
Oh, yeah.
crazy. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a capitalist. Don't get me wrong here. I'm a capitalist. And if, I don't know who owns Halo. Is it Microsoft that owns Halo?
Yeah, 343 Microsoft.
So if Microsoft can make like $6 billion off of Halo and a TV show that cost them legitimately $600 million to make, God bless them. God bless them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm rooting for them. If it's going to cost them the same amount of money to make a video game and they're only going to make $3 billion on it, God bless them.
Like I said, the people that hate the show tune in every week. They're giving it a second season instead of saying, hey, I'm going to vote with my time and my wallet, and I don't like what you're doing. Like, stop wasting your time on stuff you hate. Find things you enjoy. And, just with the Halo thing in general, I mean, they made a ton of money off it because people kept tuning in instead of just finding other stuff. Most of the things that I see now, it's like Andor. I was watching Andor, and the reason I tuned into Andor was because I didn't see anybody hating on it. I was like, and I'm like, oh, because it's kind of boring. So you can't hate on it because it's just boring. It's not bad. It's just, it's not great, but it's not bad. I think it's decent Star Wars. I like the politics on it. It's really diving into that. And as like I am a huge sci-fi nerd. I love a good sci-fi politics show, and I like the world building they're doing in it. But I don't see people hating on that. I see people hating on like She-Hulk when we learned a long time ago that they want to tell a story and they just use whatever like platform they have to do that. And you're not going to get the comic. You're not going to get the book, whatever it is that you're looking for. You're most likely not going to get that because it's already been done.
It's
right?
just interesting the way IPs work and what Disney views and how they rank their IP and what they even want the IP for. And so I just think it's super interesting. The fact that
they destroyed Star Wars. I will die on that sword. I will argue with that one. They destroyed a lot of stuff with that. And I won't even get into the quality of it, but they destroyed it because they didn't have a plan. They had a lot
of... Oh, come on. Episode 8 was amazing. You got to admit, Episode 8 was great, man. I mean, it was the greatest thing on the planet.
I might have to go. No. So Episode 7 was safe. I grew up on Star Wars. As a kid, I had a pretty tough childhood. And Star Wars was one escape I had as a child. And
Episode 5 is the greatest episode of Star Wars. I will die on that hill.
I mean, Episode 5 wasn't that bad. And I think the first 3 movies, you can pick and choose which one's the best. Some people like Episode 4, 5, or 5 and 6. I'm personally a huge fan of the sand scene in Episode 2. I think that's the best scene ever written. Next to Leia getting sucked in from space. But that's probably what did it for me, was when they didn't have a plan, and we go into Episode 8, and I'll tell you where Disney lost me.
I was being sarcastic.
I know. I picked up on it.
I'm making sure.
No, Disney lost me when they started making pointless jokes, like the cell phone joke, right? Can you hear me now? We've had at this point 7 movies plus whatever else content showing like intergalactic communication without any static, and you're gonna tell me that this like head general believes that there's some kind of communication error between a few hundred yards, like that one got me. I was like, all right, whatever. We'll get past the stupid joke that doesn't fit, leave it in Guardians of the Galaxy. I can buy it there. We don't need Guardians of the Galaxy in Star Wars. And then they did the Leia scene. And I'll tell you why it ruined it for me is she had just passed away, and we were as kids, we were all introduced to Leia in space. That's where she was first found on the space station, right? And she's dying going into space. And the actress had died, and I was like, wow, that's such a beautiful send-off for the character to let her literally deteriorate into space. I thought it was beautiful. And I was sitting there, I was getting kind of emotional, and all of a sudden she gets sucked back in, and every ounce of emotion I had just came crushing down on me, and I was like, F this movie, I'm walking out. Like,
Yeah,
you just destroyed it.
I really liked that scene because I also thought it was very similar to Spock at the end of Wrath of Khan. And then I was like, yo, this is kind of cool. You're taking, tribute to Wrath of Khan a little bit, and then, just didn't do it for me. Just I was like, oh, this is just rough. And then episode 9 wasn't much better.
Episode 9 was bad because episode 8 destroyed everything. But I mean, it's tough because fandoms are built with different fans with different opinions. And none of us are right, but none of us are wrong, if that makes sense. And
to a degree,
when in the past year, I just got tired of having a lot of stuff that I liked not be what I expect. So, yeah, my rule is now if I'm not going to like it, I'm not going to watch it. And I have so much other crap to do that it doesn't bother me. I've got 40 issues in my book to draw. I've got show after show after show to jump on and promote. I've got a Kickstarter running. Like, I have other things to do than get mad about a show, a twerking scene in a TV show.
I just think it's interesting because, again, I own a bunch of stock in a bunch of different media companies, and I understand the difference between ruining something, what these companies want an IP for and what they don't. And I just think it's interesting because we're now also entering the stage in the indie world where now Hollywood and all these companies are knocking, and they're coming to knock in the next 10 years to find new IPs to exploit, buy, use, or whatnot, or whatever they want, or take them off the market because they're a competitor to what Disney already has. And Disney will buy something and shelf it. They'll pay you a lot of money for it, but they'll put it in the back room for 20 years and then you'll get it back. But they don't want it out there because they don't want it to compete. And that's what big companies do. There's a reason why people have companies and then Walmart goes and buys the entire thing or buys a license and doesn't put it out. And they'll produce the product. They just won't put it out for 5 years because they have their brand and it's cheaper for Walmart to buy $500,000 worth of your product if your product is better, superior, and cheaper than Walmart's brand. Because it's sick. It's sick. It's crazy, but I digress. That's a whole corporate media discussion. Yeah. For everybody else. On this show, we don't shy away from anything. That's why people get canceled on my show.
Perfectly fine.
But yeah, what were we saying?
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, so none of that stuff ever makes it into my story. We make fun of pop culture quite a bit. There's lots of references. They're very self-aware because it happens in the real world. So, anybody that watches this, I just say, like, it's a fun book. And like I said, it's free. The free issue 0 is on the website. Check it out. I have yet to have anybody give me any negative feedback on how I describe it. And it's been really cool, especially on this run of promotion that I've done for the Kickstarter. People I've talked to in the past on previous shows, they've backed the books, they've checked it out, and everyone says it's exactly how you describe it. It's just a lot of fun. And I think that's the best feeling in the world, is knowing that people have fun reading my book. So
yeah, and then I do want to back out of all that and actually talk about your rewards and really how your stuff isn't that expensive, all things considering. So obviously you can get pretty much digital issue of, issue 6. You can get the digital catch-up, and then the physical copy for the regular cover, which I think it is this one right here, I think is $6. Yep. I think that's cover A, right?
Yep.
And
I do that on purpose. I'm asking people to spend money on something they don't really know much about. There's a lot of new people, and you can go to the comic book store and pick up a book of Spider-Man for $3 or $4. So why do you want to spend $10 on my book? given my book's probably longer because I think most comic books are 20 to 22 pages. We average about 26 to 30. This book will come in right at 26, 28 with additional content.
Yeah.
But I like everything being accessible. And right now it's tough. We're in fourth quarter. People are gearing up for Christmas. I don't want to break your wallet.
It's also the idea is that, and I mean, look, I love the concept. I run an eBay business and I sell comic books, and I like to have merchandise for $10 or $20, and I like to have a product for $400 and everything in between, because somebody might be able to buy a book for $20 or even for $50, and then you could tier them up very slowly. If you start your price at $30, then the next step is what, 45? There gets to a point in business where you want to get somebody in, you want to indoctrinate them into, I guess, your book, your clan, whatever you want to call it, your system, for lack of a better word. And then you slowly, whether it's on that same campaign or the second campaign or the third campaign, get them to spend more money and become a returning customer and a more valuable customer. And I think if you have a $6 book, it's hard for me to say, oh man, I can't afford that book. I'm more likely to at least try it, I feel, and feel more comfortable. And then hopefully what happens is that I come back and then I buy a $10 book the next time, or I buy, a $30 book the next time, or I buy everything the next time, or, somebody then becomes a retailer, for lack of a better word. And so all of a sudden, now you also have a returning customer, which means that your customer acquisition cost goes down as well, which is a big thing. This is all business 101.
I've been in business for a long time, and I do marketing. I've been in some big seats, and everything about this is getting the book out. This just needs to pay for itself. This doesn't need to put food on my table, right? I work 2 full-time jobs so that I can do this. I also taught myself how to draw, how to color, how to letter, so I don't have to pay anybody, which lowers my overhead, which allows me to produce a cheaper book. I know a lot of people in the industry. I took a lot of notes early on, and I said, this is how we're going to do it, so that way people can get into it. I have people that do just digital books. That's great. You're still reading my book. I have guys that come in time after time, and they do the $100 plus tier because they like everything about it. I have people that came in on the first crowdfunding adventure we did. They got just the T-shirt and the shirt and the book, and now they've got the trade paperback, and they've collected the entire thing multiple times. So I like to have tiers that are attractive to anybody on any budget, so you can get in at any level, enjoy what you read, and I have add-ons too, so you can customize it. If you just want the book and maybe like another cover, you can add that cover and be done with it. If you want the book and maybe a cat, you can do that too. There's a lot of different configurations on there, so that way everybody can get what they want and not feel like they're breaking the bank just to enjoy my story.
Because I talk about this all the time where, obviously having an affordable tier for everybody, because I hate to say this and it's going to sound messed up. If I don't know what the hell your book is, it looks interesting. I like a particular cover, but I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to like this. But you have a $6 tier, or even your tiers are like, it's $20 for a book. And then I go back, I'm a big Zenoscope reader. So Zenoscope sells a limited 350 print run for $20 by a top artist. And then I look at somebody's Kickstarter and I'm like, you have an artist that I have no idea who this is. They haven't really worked for a major publisher, and you're going to charge me $25. I don't know what the story is about beyond what you told me. I don't know who this artist is. I don't know any information. I don't know its resellability. Like, there gets to a point where I'm like, I don't feel like spending $25. But if you say, hey, it's $10 and there's those unknowns, well, you just halved the price down. You cut it even further down. And so now there's less risk for me. And so that's something that I think is very, very important that creators don't understand. And even going into
I'm an avid Kickstarter person, and I have a budget on my books. I back a lot of Kickstarters, and I want physical copies, but if your physical copies outside my budget, I want to go digital. And I've even seen digitals for 18-page book for $10.
Oof.
And I'm like, I can't just, and that's the thing. I want to support you, but I can't justify the cost. And so when I look at mine, I say, would I buy this if I wasn't me? Right? Like, I don't work with my wallet. I work with the idea of, like, if this was me, looking at your book, Andrew, I don't know Andrew. I go to Andrew's, Kickstarter, and I see a digital for $10 that's 20 pages long. Why am I like, I'm not getting a tangible item for $10, and it's not, if it was a 50 or 60 page book, I can see a $10 digital. I really can, because there's a lot of work that goes into 50, 60 pages, and I'm getting bang for my buck. But I don't want to spend $10 on a digital unless it's pretty long. If you have an 18, 20 page book, I just don't have the budget for it, because there's a lot of creators that I know and I want to support, and I can't do that. I can't support 100 books, and drop a lot of money.
I'm very selective on what I support now. I'm very selective.
Yeah, it's tough.
And there's a lot of reasons why. I mean, I run a business, and I hate to say this, but I'm very selective. I'm very selective on what I read, and it takes a lot to get me out of bed. And I hate to say this, but I also don't now even look at the book itself. I look at the person behind the book. I have to vet people, and it sounds messed up, but there's a lot of good people in comics, and there's a lot of bad people in comics, and I vet people. And one of the advantages that I interview a lot of people, but I also even go further beyond that, where I do a little homework on who you are. I do a little homework on how you did an interview. I view your reputation in a lot of ways, and I make sure that somebody, is paying their artists, right? Or they don't snap at fans. They don't attack people that, somebody says, I like Batman, and they say, well, I'm an Iron Man fan, go to hell. And I'm using that as a very simple thing, because it's more complicated than that. But obviously that's how I view it. So if you're a horrible human being and your book's great, chances are I'm not backing you, because at a certain stage, there's a million creators, and I have as much choice as I want as a fan. And as an interviewer, I have a huge amount of choice too. It's crazy.
Especially with Kickstarter, you have access to so many books that if you can't afford somebody's story, I'm sure you're going to find something that you enjoy. And it's just tough to budget right now with so many good books out there. So again, anybody that's going to check out my book, tiers start at $3. Physical, like digital tiers start at $3. Physical start at $6. And
this one's $8. I think this is $8. I think this is like 10, which is a foil.
That's a foil cover. So foils are a little bit more expensive because they just cost more to print,
But even still, $10 for a foil isn't that bad. And then this one is a little bit more as well.
That's the deluxe, has 4 additional content pages, so you get a longer book too.
And but it's still not that expensive, all things considered. What is this, like 18? I want to say around that number, or is it even cheaper?
No, that's just 12. It goes 6, 8, 10, 12. So, the $6 and the $8 books. That's because Robert Nix is he is a pretty expensive guy now. He's done quite a bit of work for me, and I on those more expensive books, you do get some more content that aren't in the $6 book, because I try to, again, just make tiers for everybody. So you can get on the base level, you can upgrade the book a little bit, you get better covers. You can also add the covers on, if you want to, customize your tier.
And then you do some other cool stuff too. Obviously, you got aluminum metal cover, which is always cool. And that's a big package. So if you want everything and you want that, and that's super limited, I would imagine, because that's almost print.
There's 2 left. Yeah, there's 2 left on that tier.
And so that's something to keep in mind. There's the energy drinks. So if you really want that energy drink, you get like 12 of them. I don't know if it's an add-on or if it's a tier in it by itself.
It is a tier by itself. I did add it as an add-on because I had a few people that wanted it that didn't want the big tier. So I was like, well, we can do it as an add-on. That's fine. I have enough to to get them, And so there's really like a tier for anybody. You can get the back, all the books for like $30. It's either 30 or 35. I don't have it right in front of me, so I apologize. but it's really not that expensive. I've got the trade paperback. You can get, that issue plus everything else. So there's 220 pages in this. So if you were to do this and book 6, you're getting around 250 pages of content.
Yeah, and then there's like collector's cards, obviously back issues, trade paperbacks. You could add on a T-shirt. I also know you got a crazy retail package, which I did the math. I think what is it?
Yeah, so if you have a retail store, you can get 16 different books, 5 issues. 5 issues each, 16 different books, and it's like $250. I actually work in retail, so it's a wholesale price, free shipping on that as well. So that's direct drop ship from our printer. So like I said, there's a tier for everybody. There's even a D&D tier. If you want to play D&D with a professional D&D, one of my guys, he actually is a professional dungeon master on the weekends and gets paid to run games. So we built a tier for him. He's going to be running an entire game of Crit for you. It's like 20 hours worth of D&D. So
it's crazy. And obviously, I ran a Kickstarter in January and for this show, and thrilled about it. Very happy about how that turned out. Definitely got me through. But yeah, again, there's a tier for everybody, and I had a bunch of different tiers on mine, so I know exactly what it means to get creative. And people loved it and people hated my campaign, and it's all right, everybody. You can hate me all you want. I'm not leaving anytime soon. Is all I'm going to say to everybody. But yeah, there's a tier for everybody, and obviously, if you have a retail store, what is it, like 80 issues for $2.75 around that price point? Which I've made a whole video on this very topic, explaining that as somebody who runs an eBay store, I need to make sure that my margins are good, and so naturally, if you're getting it for $2.75, $3 a book, and you can sell those books for $10, give or take, on eBay or in your retail store, your margins are sweet enough that the store can make money. And that's
you should be making their 50% discount. So you get them at right above what it cost me to print them. There's very little money on the wholesale side, but it's just to get those books in comic book stores. I do need to get my kid to bed tonight, so I'm
just going to let you give you a chance to self-promote, and obviously that's what's going on. So, I'm going to give you like 5 minutes. So where can people find you, bother you, hit you up, disturb you, whatever they want, and all that fun stuff?
Stalk me. The easiest place to find me is Instagram. It's at Homebrewed Comics. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. It's Homebrewed Comics there as well, but instead of a CS at the end, it's just an X. You can also go to homebrewedcomics.com. That has everything there, including the link for the Kickstarter to make it easy. So if you're interested in the book, go to homebrewedcomics.com. It runs till November 11th. Click the link. Everything's there. If you see something you want or we need to customize something, let me know. I'll get on it. We just unlocked the first stretch goal, which is the digital comic book bundle. So everybody that backs right now is getting 6 additional books for free. The next tier will unlock at 3,500, and I have stretch goals all the way up through 5,000. Right now, we're sitting a little bit over $3,000 in a week. So really awesome. Thank you for everyone that's come out. If you're new to Crit and you're worried about maybe investing in a book you don't know anything about, go to the website, homebrewedcomics.com, download issue 0 for free. If you like it, check it out on Kickstarter.
Yeah, and all I'm going to say before I let everybody peace out in it is that you have to support indie. And what that means is when people have Kickstarters that are going on, you need to back them. And you need to follow people on social media, and you need to back them, and you need to throw your money at it, whether it's $1, $6, $100, whatever it is. It does make a difference, and it does help to make books get made and printed. So obviously, I recommend everybody do that. And then I'm just going to quickly promote myself. Obviously, all my social media is down below. It's Pop Anime Comics on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Pop Anime Comics. And so please come check me out there. Hit me up. Anything you want to know about me is on all those 4 things. It's just Pop Anime Comics. But if I owe you money, I'm going to quietly leave as if I broke something in a store. And so that's where we're going to end this entire episode, everybody. And that is a wrap.